we're discussing the clinical trial. So we just continue with a summary of the clinical trial. So our topic today is the risk management. As you can see, that is depend on the ISO 3130. So we can say ISO 3130000. So we will talk about the risk management, effect of uncertainty on the objectives. That's actually what is the definition of a risk, like the effect of uncertainty on the objectives, because we didn't predict what is the risk, what is this a chance, and increase the chance of a project success, because if we just do a risk management, that it increases the success of this project. As you can see, the risk equals probability multiply loss. So how we can measure the risk, it equals the probability multiplied by the loss, and we can just like we will use another equation for the risk. So the risk equals the probability multiplied by the loss. So the first we will start about the risk identification, then we go to the risk analysis, then we go to the risk response and the planning, then the risk monitoring and the control. This is the process of the risk management. So the first we identify what is the risk, is the effect of uncertainty on the objectives. The risk management is an important for the success of the project, because if there is a risk, what we should do. So the first one is what we do is risk identification. So we have to identify what is the risk here. We should identify the risk, and then we do analysis to this risk, like what is a risk, how that is come, what are the results. We do analysis of the risk, and then the response and the planning, how we just avoid it, how we just prevent it, and this stuff. And finally, the control, we can say risk control and then monitoring. So the risk control and monitoring. So these are the steps of the risk management. So we have to identify the risk, then the analysis, then the planning and response, and then finally control and monitoring. So these are the risk management. But first I will talk about the risk identification, how we can identify the risk, how we can say that is the risk to our project. We can use many techniques like a brainstorming, like a checklist, like interviewing, like SWOT. SWOT, that's mean S strengths, W, that's mean weekends, O, opportunities, T, threatens. And this is the way that when we do any projects, we have to do this, analysis. And there is a Delphi technique. Okay, and what is a Delphi technique? This is the Delphi technique. This is the methods that use to gather the opinions, the sides, accept the judgments through the multiple rounds of a questionnaires. Like we do multiple rounds of a questionnaires, we gather the opinions, the insight, and this stuff, and we can just imagine what is the risk. We can by this way identify the risk. So we have like many techniques we use it just to identify the risk, like a brainstorming, like a checklist. We can do also SWOT technique, and I explained that, and also Delphi technique, diagramming technique. By this way we identify the risk, and again we analyze the risk, response planning, and then control and monitoring. The treatment of the risk by avoidance of the risk, or reduction, or we can say mitigation, or sharing, by sharing the risk that reduces the risk. So, or acceptance and budgeting. We can accept the risk because it doesn't affect our system, and then budgeting the risk. So that's how we deal with the risk. Maybe we avoid this risk by many steps, or we reduce it, or we accept it, or we're sharing it, but we didn't ignore it. Okay, we didn't ignore it at all, or we don't at all. So the treatment of the risk is by avoidance, reduction, sharing, and acceptance, and budgeting that. There is something is called failure mode and effect analysis, FMEA. That's mean failure mode and effect analysis, and we can just calculate what is the risk value, which is equals probability multiply impact multiply detection. That's exactly this equation is related to the failure mode and effect analysis. And then we go to the sum abbreviation. We have to know it, like ALUCA. And the ALUCA is refers to the principle of the data integrity in the clinical trial. Like these are the principles that we should have it to make sure the data integrity in the clinical trial. So we have the first word is attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, accurate, and then complete. We can add it to it. And the changes should be justified, documented, and traceable. These are so important just to memorize these things. So look at these are the principles that maybe sometimes the investigator use it for the data integrity to ensure the data integrity. So the first word is attributable, and the word is what that's mean exactly. Attributable. Attributable, that mean we know who is the person who just write this data and who edit it. We know everything, and that is like clear. That's mean exactly when I said attributable. So when we change this data, we know who's the person who did that. So that's exactly what is attributable. Attributable, that's mean we know exactly who the person who did that and who edited that, everything. Legible, when these data are or when this data is clear and readable, I can see. So legible, that's mean when the data is clear and we can read it, it's very clear. That's the word that we can say it for legible. Contemporaneous, that's mean we just record the data in the same time of the event. Like we just collect the data in the same time. We don't delay that. That's mean exactly with the contemporaneous. And then original, that's mean we have to save all the data, all the original data, all the records, all the sources, and it should be accurate. That means it should be complete, should be documented very accurately, and that's exactly what is ALUCA. And the ALUCA, it's a very important to know it. So attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, accurate, and then complete, we can say. And there is something is called the SMART, and that's mean S specific, M measurable, A achievable, R relevant, T time. And that is used as the planning. That's an important for any project management or planning. If we just making a planning or a management of the project, we use a technique is called SMART, S. And that's exactly not only for the clinical trial. You can do it for any project you do in your life. So S, that's mean specific, that's mean the goal should be specific, should be clear, should be that's exactly what I mean. The goal should be clear. M, that's mean measurable, that's mean we can measure the progress. Okay. A, that's mean achievable, it should be the goal is logic and it can be achieved, and it can be we can do it. And then relevant, that's mean what we do it is relevant to our goal. And T, it should be time bound, that's mean any project it should has an begin or start and end. It can be forever. Okay, that's exactly what is a technique. It's called the SMART, which is so important for the project management and the planning. So as specific, M measurable, A achievable, R relevant, T that's mean time bound. And then we talk about the phases of the project management, which is related to the ISO 69015. What are the phases? The first one is conception and initiation. Like we initiate this project, we start this project. So we have the conception, we have the idea, and we have the initiation. And then we go to the definition and the planning. So we have the idea, we have like the idea what is a project about. Then we should have the definition, and we have also the planning. And then after we do the plan or we do the map for that, then we go to the launch or execution. That's mean we have to start this project and we do all the steps that we have to do it. And then the conduct and monitoring. So the other thing that we have to conduct it and monitoring it, like by the multiple visits on this stuff. And finally the close. So these are, we can say, the phases or the steps of the project management. So we will start about the conception and initiation. As you see, I want you, like we want to know what is it exactly. The project idea examined for its benefit. If this concept or the idea of the project we accept it, like we find it is useful or good or something, and the decision making if the project is realistic and completed. How we know that is realistic and completed? By the smart. And that is an important, if there is a specific, if the goal is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound, then we have to start this project. And that's exactly for the planning. So the first one is conception and initiation, that we have should focus if the idea of the project is realistic, relevant, clear. This is stuff we use, this is smart. And then the definition and the planning. A project plan, project scope, we have to do a complete plan for this project. Okay, and then the resources and the time calculated. So we have time, we have a plan, we know what is the start, what is the end, what we have to do, we have steps, we have everything for that. So we have the definition and the planning. And then the launch or execution, the resources, tasks are distributed and team are informed. Launch or execution, that's mean the team, the staff, the training, everyone should know his task and what have to do. And also the resources and this stuff should be done. Conduct and monitoring, PM compares, that's mean the project management compares the project status and the progress, the actual plan might be need to be adjusted to the schedules. That's mean the conduct and monitoring, we just do monitoring and visits, and if there is errors or something or problems or issues, we have just maybe we come to edit it, we make in many goals for that, and then we end with a close, which is the task are completed and the silence approves the outcome. That's exactly the steps or the phases of the project management. Again, we start with the initiation and conception, definition and the planning, then launch and execution, and then we go to the conducting and monitoring, and finally close. Again, I told you about the SWOT. Again, that is not only related to the clinical trial because we can use that in our lives. So S, strength, W, weakens, O, opportunities, T, threats analysis. And then we talk about the EDORA city, and we have to know what is EDORA referred to, or abbreviation for what. E, European, D, drug, and U, that's mean recognition, and maybe it's referred to the and or recognition agency clinical trial. So EDORA CT is European Drug and Regulation Agency of a clinical trials. What is it? It's actually outlined a platform that is important for the registration and tracking of a clinical trial. If we just wanted to register our clinical trial, we have to register it in EDORA City, but that is only belong to the Europe. But what is referred to the USA is called clinicaltrials.government. As you can see here, that they are both online platform, so we can do that by electronic. So when you hear EDORA city, that's mean that is referred to the Europe, but the clinical trials.government that is related to the USA. So clinical trials.government that is related to the USA, EDORA, which mean what that means, it's European Drug and Regulatory Agency of a clinical trial. So we just register all the interventional clinical trial from phase 1 to the phase 4, and the register it's up to 21 days after the first enrollment. So after the first enrollment, we have to register it for 21 days. So we have 21 days, and the results should be after the last patient visit, 6 months for the pediatric results and 12 months for the adults. These are the important things that we to know about the Idora city. So, Idora city, which is European Drug and Regulatory Authorities of a clinical trial, it's actually a online platform for the registration of a clinical trial. We have to register all the phases of a clinical trial, starting from phase 1 to the phase 4, and the register is up to the 21 days after the first enrollment, and the results it will be 6 months after for the pediatric and the 12 months. Okay, as you can see, Clinical Trials Government is an online platform for the USA Idora City that is the online for the European. And so we have two registrations in this stuff, in these regulations. If there is non-compliance with the registration regulation, then what is happened? They just send the message to FDAA, CMS, ICMGE. We'll start about the FDA. So we know what is the FDA. It's actually Food and Drug Administration, but AA, that's mean Amendment Act. When there is non-compliance or violation, so we have to do with holding of the National Institutes of the Health or FDA sanction or penalties when there is nothing good about these things. Okay, so the first organization is called FDAA, that's mean FDA Amendment Act. And then we go to another organizations if there is non-compliance with the register regulation, which is called CMS, and that's mean exactly the Centers for the Medical Care System. It's responsible for the billing and the funding delayed or denied of billing. ICMJE, International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, and there is no publishing in the ICMGE and other selected genres. So you can see I, that's mean International Committee of the Medical Journals Editors. Observers for the ICH, International Council of the Harmonization, GCP Good Clinical Practice E 6R2. There are many responsibilities for that: WHO of Canada and also EFTA, which means European Free Trade Area. And then there are two types of the trials. We have superior trial and non-inferior trial. The superior trial, that's mean if the tested drug, I mean the effect of the tested drug is more than the effect of comparator, and we know the comparator is the reference drug. So if the tested drug is superior, that's mean the effect of it is superior to the comparator, we called it superior trial. But if they are just approximately same to each other, so we can say non-inferior trial. And again, we talk about the compositions or components of the protocol. I explained all. These are a lot of components of a protocol, but it's composed of objectives, the design and methodology, organization, and the statistical consideration. The other thing that we have to know is in the phase 1, we know that in the phase 1 we called it a human pharmacology, and the phase 2 we called it as therapeutic exploratory, phase 3 therapeutic confirmatory. In the phase 1, actually we used volunteers, actually from 10 to the 100 volunteers. What is the intervention method that we use? Single arm, cross-sectional, and parallel. So we use all these we can say interventional methods. So single arm, I said before, that is uncontrolled, while the parallel and the cross-sectional, they are controlled actually. So we use all these in the phase 1, but here we just use the single arm, parallel, cross-sectional, they are uncontrolled. We didn't use controlled in the phase 1. There is no control group in the phase 1. Okay, and according to the allocation, actually we use randomization and non-randomization, so we use both of them, but there is no control. And the other thing, that there is no blinding at all in the phase 1. But in the case of the phase 2, we have a cross-sectional and parallel. Parallel is P, while the cross-sectional is A. And remember that the cross A, we use the single blinding, that's mean the participant do not know any treatment. And the phase 2, which is parallel, we use double blinding, that's mean the researcher and the participant, they do not the treatment. We use control in the phase 2, so the placebo or the standard drug or sham procedure or whatever is it. And phase 2, about the allocation, actually the same as the phase 1, randomization or non-randomization. Then the calculation of a clinical study, we just make a comparison between the medicinal products and the medical device. What is the responsible for them as a global, as European, as the USA and the Germany. In the medicinal product, the correlation of Helsinki for both of them, ICH for the medical product, while the medical device we use ISO 14155 2020. And for the Europe medical device medical products 2020 EC or AU 536 2014, and the medical device regulation, which is called 2017 745. In the USA we have the code of the federal regulation CFR, both of them. And in the Germany Arzneimittel Gesetz AMG or GCP for ordering, that's mean the regulation. Here we use the Medicinal Technique Gesetz, which is called MP, but I don't know why it's called P here. And then we talk about the data flow. So the first we have to sign the protocol, then we do the packaging of the investigational product, then we do the first patient first visit, then we do the database pulls, then the database analysis, the last patient last visit, then the database log, and then the clinical study report is finalized. So all these are the steps of the data flow. So we sign the protocol, and then we do the packages of the investigational product, and we have to give that to the patient. So the first patient first visit, and then we do the database build, database analysis, and then we do the last patient last visit data log, and then the clinical study report. What are the components of the site management? Principal investigator, clinical research coordinator, clinical research associate, data manager, site manager, regulatory affairs specialist, research nurse, pharmacovigilance officer, study monitor. So how to be able to memorize this stuff? So when it's a question is said components, or what are the the components of the site management. So site management, that means site manager. So we have the site management from its name, or from the questions you can answer it. So we have the site manager. So if you remember the site manager, then you remember a data manager. So we should have both of them, the site manager, the data manager. And then we have both of them, like a clinical research coordinator and a clinical research associate. These are so important. And then we have the, like we can say, the medical organization investigator, principal investigator, which should be a physician or a dentist, and we should have a nurse as a research nurse, and we should have a pharma, which is called pharmacovigilance officer. And then finally the study monitor for monitoring everything that is here, and should be compliance with the regulations of regulatory affairs specialist. And by this way we can just memorize every components of the site manager. So remember, start with the site manager, data manager, clinical research coordinator, clinical research associate, our medical organization, I can say, her investigator, nurse, pharmacovigilance, and then the regulatory affairs and the study monitor. We have the components of a clinical research site. That's mean all the stuff, all the important things, like we use the principal investigator, the sponsor should be here, clinical research coordinator, clinical research associate, participant, subject. And we talked about before about the clinical research associate, and we said the most important functions is they are source data verification, source data review. These are the most important. Then we can talk about the monitoring of the visits, monitoring of the documents, assessing the documents, I mean here, the soft skill should be here, appointment by the sponsors, all this stuff, okay. And then the participant subject for protocol, regularity documents, data management team, all this stuff, you can say in the clinical research side, that's important things that we have to know about the clinical trial at all. So the investigator should be the sponsors, the subject, the protocol, the regulatory documents. I think these are the principles that we should know, and then we have to know the clinical research coordinator, clinical research associate, data management team, and finally the lab findings. And what we have to know about the patient. Here we have the patient, the aspects of the ICH for the patient. What are the aspects that the ICH talked about the patient, qualified oversight, the risk benefit assessment, because that's important, because the benefits should be more than the risk, the subject safety, that's so important, confidently, the protection of the data of the patient, informed consent, and then qualified. So all these aspects very important. We have ICH E5 that is concerned about the ethics, ICH E7 clinically advised and gender directed population, A11 geriatric and pediatric populations. And then we have the components of the informed consent, which is most important the questions. We have a trial and we have a patient. The trial that involves the research, the purpose of the trial, the treatment of the trial, the treatment procedures, the experiments of the trial, the approximate number of the subjects, the monitors, editors, ethics, regularities, direct access to the subject original medical record. That's to memorize the components of the informed consent. And as a treatment, it should have alternative treatment and compensations. And I think that they are just, like the same thing, that we should have the alternative treatment for this. So we have the purpose, the results, the treatment, the procedure, the experiment, and what is according to the subjects, the number of the subjects. The patient, which is the subject responsibilities, the risk to the subjects, the benefits to the subjects, the anticipated payment expenses should be voluntary, should informed in a timely manner. That means when there is any changes should be informed about that. Also contact person for the further information. And if he just terminate the he just want to withdraw from the clinical trial, the reasons why he is terminates, and expected duration of the participants. And then we talk about the basic principles, or we can say best practice for the informed consent. The first one is identification of the study, documentation of the presenters of the rule, the date and the time of the IC discussion, the discussion itself, that means the contents of the discussion, the participant interaction, confirmation of understanding, the consents outcome, the reconsents, the supporting documentation by signing, and finally make notes in the medical record. So these are the components, or we can say like how it's formed the informed consent, how the paper of the informed consent is present. And by this way we can just finish our summary for today.